Entry Log 1. Krakon Eld, Jukanian Ambassador to the Human Alliance. Stardate, Human Year 2086. It has been over 3 centuries since I accepted this commission to work with the Human Alliance, and even though I have known them for that long, they still surprise me to a shocking extent. A highly diverse species with so many different cultures congealed into one staggering mass of 100 billion strong, settled alongside all the galaxy's different species. Humanity was, and still remains, the driving force behind the rapidly growing Federation's power and might. The strange, gaunt, high-gravity race of bipedal apes took the galaxy by complete surprise, not only due to their appearance, but also due to their surprising strength. In barely 40 years of their time here, they have integrated seamlessly with species previously thought inhospitable. Planets thought harsh or unusable, supported massive colonies of millions of humans, and the richness, the industries these worlds provide. Humans, as it later turned out, had an affinity for members of other species, and by staggering luck, they had a 1 in a billion reproductive system that was robust enough that they could actually interbreed with most mammalian species in the galaxy and 1 or 2 of the reptilians as well. Humanity's capabilities in terms of engineering surpassed ours in a matter of decades, and due to the terms of the Federation, they shared it with us. This is primarily due to the tribal nature of the race, and they are well known for their petty squabbles and minor disputes that result in skirmishes or outright wars, but would never come to full-scale attacks. Maybe a warning shot or two, a small exchange of fire to disable shield arrays, but never more than that. When questioned about these incidents, human ambassadors and leaders would simply say something on the lines of, "Meh, local tensions, pirates, idiots," God-botherers or idealists that randomly decide to slug it out one day. Just ignore them, they run out of steam eventually and bugger off back to where they came from. We really cared not. Owing to how the humans never turned their guns on us, we were fine with it, so long as they never got us involved. Everything about the humans confused and amazed us. They had, during first contact exchanges, given us reels upon reels of their historical archives. And what we had now was essentially a marginally watered-down version of what humanity once was, hardened like a battleship hull. Entry Log 2. Human Expansion. Owing to their ability to breed with a majority of the species in the galaxy, human society, cultures, and customs became part and parcel of the Federation species, almost to the point where we started getting cults forming in small pockets on the outer rims, worshipping this aspect. Humanity, surprisingly enough, even though they technically were the deity being worshipped by these cults, were the first ones to clamp down on them, disbanding or outright attacking them. Humans retained a lot of their individual national cultures long after their arrival into space. Many of their soldiers still carried blades, swords, knives, and other such primitive weapons, weapons that most members of the galactic species considered worthless or obsolete. But humans wielded these weapons to devastating effect, as witnessed in a few incidents and military conflicts seen during their short time in the Federation. Technological advancement in terms of military and civilian development outstretched the rest of the galaxy by, to quote an expression, a country mile. Human creativity and the natural drive for both an omnivorous species' capacity for greed and the species' natural curiosity drove them to accomplish tasks and tech we never would have imagined. Humans and their concept of percussive maintenance, or smack it till it worked, was also something that took us by surprise, especially considering that most of the time it actually worked. For a few decades, a long time in human years apparently, we simply took it at face value and never questioned it. As the expression goes, never look a gift horse in the mouth, or sin. Entry Log 3. Capacity for Evil. They were not complete angels and paragons, of course. Many a time, more than other races, especially during the early years, they were extremely aggressive in their colonization efforts, going to active war with many nations over territorial disputes, corporate conflicts, or other such disputes. Either they would win by a bare margin, or they would be routed and sent off in pieces. One such occasion was the Tabrisco incident, where, from what I could discern, was a human corporation. A private entity separate from the Alliance and the Federation, known as Cybertech Industries, had laid claim to a particular star system. A star system already settled by its current inhabitants, the Hasaki Triumvirate. It was here that humanity showed its capacity for callous greed and why so much emphasis is placed in society on the rejection of corporate ideals. It also showed us a modicum of respectability. When someone was being a dick, they had no trouble fucking them. The corporation, or simply corpos, gathered a fleet of about 40 ships, 2 of them cruisers and 1 arc ship. They proceeded without orders to bypass most security legislation, bribing their way across the galaxy and arrived in the system of Tabrisco, 2 terrestrial planets, 1 oceanic planet in the habitable zone, 1 gas giant, 2 ice planets, and 1 newborn molten planet. An unremarkable system by all accounts. There were thousands just like it throughout the galaxy. The corpos warped in and sent out a mass broadcast. "This is a public declaration. On behalf of the Cybertech Corporation, your occupation of this star system is now null and void. You will evacuate from the area immediately. You have a standard week to respond." The sheer bastarding balls of them. A human representative was contacted and informed of the situation. The human ambassador, a gaunt, tall, white-haired gent by the name of Harley Allride, had a sneaky, unmistakable grin on his face as he spoke to the ambassador from the Hasaki Triumvirate. "So, what exactly is the issue here?" The Hasaki ambassador, Sings on Shores, was by no means amused. The lizard-like reptilian's blue scales flared in anger as he spoke back. "For the 3rd time, we have a human fleet calling itself the Cybertech Corporation demanding that we surrender one of our colony worlds. I demand an explanation." Harley simply let out a chuckle, as if he was suppressing the desire to laugh. "Oh, corpo rats, huh? Well, they are a private entity. There's nothing we can do to stop you or them." Sings on Shores was somewhat confused, but more upset and angry. "What? What?" Harley simply said, that typical sly, "I am up to something sneaky" grin on his face that we had become so accustomed to seeing. "What I'm saying, Ambassador, is that whatever you decide to do with them is entirely your decision." Sings on Shores was astonished. This situation was a full invasion by galactic standards. It was the equivalent of a declaration of war. "But they are your people. You speak for them." Harley's smile disappeared, and his demeanor changed to one of seriousness. "Mr. Ambassador, with all due respect, need I remind you of Federation colonization legislation number 758, paragraph 3? I quote, 'The first claimant to any star system that has the capacity to maintain any industry on that planet has full and absolute control of its industry, and inevitably its defense is the sole and exclusive claimant to that star system,'" Harley said, and looked at his counterpart. "Of course I remember the damn legislation. I helped sign that into law 100 years ago. What the hell are you talking about?" Sings on Shores demanded, his scales flustering between breaths. "What I am saying, sir, is that private entities known as corporations and other private entities can form outside of the Alliance's jurisdiction. They can get rich, get an ego the size of a cargo freighter, and then suddenly decide, 'I am God now, I can do what I want,' and go on a rampage. We allow it for reasons that should be obvious. We do, however, disavow." Harley's last word in that statement took the Hasaki ambassador by surprise. Disavow, woo. The entire concept for the Hasaki of private corporations operating outside of jurisdiction was as much a foreign concept to him as could be imagined. "We allow these entities to buy their own fleets, set up shop, and do what they do. They return to the Alliance eventually, one way or another. It's just business. But sometimes, the rich and wealthy develop a God complex. And it is up to the normal people in the galaxy to remind them of what they really are, lest they do stupid things." Harley responded. He looked into the monitor and visibly closed one of his eyes in a cheeky manner with his smile returned. Sings on Shores went silent for a moment, as if processing the information. "Understood, Ambassador." "One more thing," Harley said. His demeanor shifted again to a dead serious and absolute severity. "Do not fire on that Ark ship. Those people signed up for a new life, not an execution. There are children on board. We will see to it they get passage to a new colony world one way or another. But the Corpo fleet, heh, enjoy the salvage. Sings on Shores acknowledged with his own sinister grin and closed the call. A few hours later, a very heavily armed war fleet of the Triumvirate warped into the star system, outnumbering and heavily outgunning the Corpo fleet. As expected, sensing danger, the Ark ship immediately performed an FTL emergency jump and vanished to the borders of the system where a human alliance fleet was casually waiting for them. The corporate fleet was nothing short of obliterated by plasma cannons and heavy weapons fire from a Triumvirate dreadnought and its escorts. Nothing left but salvage and slag floating hopeless in the expanse where a salvage crew from the colony appeared and went to town. 3,000 people were killed in that fight. 2 Triumvirate ships were lost, totaling 600 losses, battleships no less. The rest were human losses. Corvettes, pickets, escort ships, and mostly small, low-quality frigates crewed by corporate drones and contracted slave workers. As Harley said, nothing worth keeping. The human ambassadors and agents explained that rich corporations or other such entities would go mad with power, gather followers or create clone armies, highly illegal clone armies, and attempt to claim what they wanted. Human alliance officers always knew what was going on and made sure that one way or another, in a fair and balanced manner, they would always lose. In a fair and balanced manner? That sentence is almost always expressed with a certain sadistic glee. Entry 4. Unbelievable charity. This event is in stark contrast to the New Haven incident that took place some 12 years later. Humanity was now at the forefront of galactic politics and economics. New Haven was in fact a Bakari settlement, and I had been called in to help them reinforce their trade position with the local area and help them along. I was in the orbital station garrisoning the colony when I heard the call to action. The communications arrays suddenly exploded with SOS signals, emergency alerts, and warnings of every kind as a staggering earthquake hit one of the continents. Seismologists put the quake on a massive 11.4 on the scale, enough to tilt the planet's axis 3 degrees, open 2 new fault lines, slow the planet's rotation speed by almost a full second, and cause 7 subsequent volcanic detonations across the tectonic plate. 29 cities were impacted, and 150 million lives were at stake. Before I could do anything, however, a message interrupted all communications directed at the local garrison. Distress signal received. This is Alliance Fleet Sons of the Dawn responding. Admiral Beckett Gray reporting. Request permission to enter Federation airspace. I was on the bridge with the station captain helping him organize a response at this time, and without thinking, I immediately jumped on the communicator in a response. This is Federation Ambassador Krakon Eld responding. Permission granted. The station captain was somewhat annoyed with me. It was not exactly polite to supplant his authority. I was only an ambassador, so he scolded me for it. How dare you do that? This is my station. You dare break with protocol like that? Captain Sundaris, please. This is an emergency situation. I responded, trying to stay calm. Before, however, we could argue this point, 100 dropships, cargo ships, and 2 planetary cruisers blasted past the station, making us jump in surprise as they whizzed past us. Moments later, the massive hull of one of the Alliance's 2-kilometer-long planetary assault carriers rumbled past the station, its sheer size and speed causing the windows and plating on the station's hull to rattle. Very few people outside the Alliance had seen one of these magnificent beasts, and as it slipped past us, we got a glimpse as to exactly why. A strange ship with a triangular or diamond-shaped hull, hangar bays on the sides, heavy armor plating with dozens of shield generators dotted the meters-thick armor plating. Weapons seen only on dreadnoughts or battleships lined its side hull under the bridge section, and more small craft were being hastily ejected from its side-mounted hangars. Its most terrifying component was what was mounted at the front, a spinal-mounted ion cannon. I could very clearly see a telltale sign of an emitter array barely sticking out the front end. It entered the planet's atmosphere flawlessly, and we watched in awe as a full army of humans flooded out of the ship's hull as it touched ground, causing a puff of dust. 2 more of these Pack-class ships followed, then 3 more after that, and 1 more lagging behind with various cargo ships and drop transports, seemingly welded to its outer hull, followed, all within moments of each other. Two more smaller craft, known as trade frigates or droid frigates, ships whose superstructure is primarily consistent of communications arrays and antennae, appeared and entered the station's orbital patterns and began transmitting commands and orders, organizing the planet's scattered and broken emergency signals. The captain and I looked at each other, mouths agape at the sight we just witnessed. Not just one of them, but 7. How many of them did humanity have? 134. And still counting, I heard a voice behind me say. Pardon? I asked, now looking at a human marine standing in the control room. That's how many of those ships we have? 134 by last count, with dry docks and shipyards in Alliance space, working to produce another 600 within the next 10 years. As per our trade agreements, 100 of those ships will be handed over to our allies and trade partners, he said with a smile, handing me a datapad. He must have heard the voice in my head somehow, or he just simply knew what the question was, probably having been asked it 1,000 times. Thank you, I cleared my throat and straightened my shoulders, attempting to compose myself. Carry on, soldier. We will coordinate with your teams on the ground and translate what we can. Not everyone on the planet understands the galactic standard language yet, so we will do our best. Patch us into your comms link and we will assist where we can. Sir. Yes, sir. The human saluted, then immediately charged back out of the station. Moments later, a new group of humans appeared and without orders began to redirect communications and show us body cam footage from the ground. What followed was the single largest and most grueling disaster relief campaign in 70 years. 20,000 ships, 200 million tons of medical supplies, 600 million tons of food and water, 2 million humans working to save the lives of 100 million people, 3.5 months of work. After all was said and done, as many lives saved as possible, human constructor fleets appeared with another surprise. They called them manufactoriums, city-sized ships with no armament or defense equipment, but cargo containers, construction drones, and building hardware. 22 of them. It wasn't a ship in the traditional sense. To be honest, it looked more like a children's block building set with giant engines. Big, fat, squared boxes with various patterns of armor plating mounted on a set of giant starship thrusters. They landed on the planet's surface and began to, for lack of a better term, unpack themselves. They landed, then a system of, robots started to unpack the blocky monster. Within hours, the ships had disappeared and turned into organized and perfected geometric patterns. They essentially made a pre-packaged city and flew it out to act as a replacement for the city that was destroyed. Millions homeless, now almost instantly rehoused. All the humans asked for in return was that we honor trade agreements and maintain the alliance. And so here we stand, many decades into the greatest and hopefully longest-lasting friendship in history, as humanity rapidly carves itself into our hearts and our minds with their increasingly erratic and interesting behavior. They are the only species in galactic history, that we are aware of anyway, to not immediately attempt to forge a galactic hegemony or engage in a genocide without due cause. They are also one of extremely few species that everybody likes. Most like their presence or enjoy their company. Some simply ignore them. The few that don't like them are quick to change their minds when rescuers or negotiators arrive when a problem shows up. Humans are here to stay, hopefully for a damn long time. Final log, Krakon Eld, Jucanian ambassador to the Human Alliance. Stardate, Human Year 2386.